discipleship is you sharing your life with the other person, with the disciple. You sharing what Jesus did in your life. In Galatians gives us that warning / reminder, don't grow weary in doing well. Here in Cambodia, a big thing is people who can teach English.
Welcome to the That Guy in Cambodia podcast. Today's episode, we're hearing from Mark Johnson, who talks about what it looks like to share the gospel in retirement. Throughout this conversation, it reminded me of my grandparents who live in Texas and use their retirement to travel the world doing gospel-centered medical missions. I hope to have them on the podcast sometime early next year. Enjoy. Mark Johnson, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Travis. Great to be here.
Could you tell me a little bit about what you do here in Cambodia?
Here in Cambodia, I do several things. I am connected with a couple of different organizations. I served as a missionary in the Philippines for over 25 years, and since 2016, I became one of the directors of a newly founded missionary clearinghouse. We call it Global Missionary Clearinghouse. It's under the umbrella of missions organization Global Surge, again, based out of Manila. And we help Filipino missionaries, Filipino couples and singles that feel called by the Lord to be missionaries in other countries. We help them to go out, to reach those countries. We encourage the churches. We have a network of churches that provide their financial support. And some have been fortunate enough also to receive support from churches in the States, one or two from Australia and different countries support, wherever they have contacts, and a lot of individual support. But they make their way to the countries, but we serve, as our title says, a clearinghouse, where funds come in and we kind of get it all together so they're not receiving 50 or 100 different deposits throughout the month. It collects, and then we give one, and that's their resource finances for their monthly ministries. And then as large project money might come in, we funnel it through there as well. So I'm one of the directors of that, and we primarily work throughout Southeast Asia, but we reach into other parts of Asia, Southern Asia, Central Asia, and we even have some missionaries serving in Africa, the African continent as well. So that's one thing I do. And of those missionaries, we have a missionary force of Filipino missionaries of about 30 people strong for Cambodia. They're not all here at the same time, but back and forth. Some are continuing to raise funds in the Philippines, but a lot are here. We have successfully planted 2 churches in the Phnom Penh area, and hopefully within this year, early next year, we have a 3rd church plant ready to go. A young man that's working with the other 2 missionaries now. So that's one thing. And then I'm also connected with a foundation from the States called the Rawlings Foundation, and their main thrust is evangelistic youth camps. The founders of that foundation had the burden to see young people throughout Asia brought to Christ and then hopefully discipled and become assimilated into local churches. So we do that. Their first camp that they built was in the Philippines, and that's how I became acquainted with them 22, 23 years ago. And then actually their 3rd camp that they built was the one here in Cambodia. But because of the situation in Cambodia, they had the burden to actually add a couple of ministries that are not in the other camps around the world, and that is a small Bible college. They founded that, called Highlands Bible College, and then a church planting ministry. And we planted over 20 churches through that, mostly in the different provinces. And those are started with graduates from that Highland Bible College. So once they graduate, they went to start a church, and so the foundation helps them do that. The Lord has enabled us or allowed us to just kind of work those ministries together while we can. So even here from Phnom Penh, we try to reach out. We have local pastors and some Filipino missionaries also in the Sihanoukville area. And we try to bring from the cities, the first and second largest cities here in Cambodia. But then we also reach out into the different provinces. And so some pastors will bring their students in or their campers in. So we're able to do that. It's a one-night camp. They come in. They have a couple of different services that they're challenged. First of all, challenged to know Jesus Christ, who he is, what he's done for them. And then those that accept the next steps in a relationship with Christ. First step of obedience being baptism, but then following and encouraging them and encouraging the pastors that brought them to follow up through discipleship. So a discipleship program. Now, one situation we have, one problem, we could call it that, is a good problem, I guess. It's an opportunity for us because we have connections in some of the different provinces in the high schools, with the high schools throughout. And some of them are large high schools, large student bodies. And so we've made good connections with some of the teachers, even the principals, and we're able to bring hundreds of students at a time from one high school alone. But the problem I was referring to is some of those are in areas where we don't have a church. And so when they get saved at camp, they begin a relationship with Jesus and they go home, there's no one there to follow. So we have to reach out on our own as best we can. The Khmer believers that are near, pastors that might be 1 to 2 hours away, they try to make contact. And even our graduates, they're not always ready at the time. So in some ways, we would need more missionaries to even help with that, to help our church planting movement here. So that is when we're praying for that. I'm reaching out in different areas as much as I can. But those are some of the things that we're able to do. And so that's what we're able to do with the connection with the foundation that has the camp and the college. But we also, with the Global Surge umbrella, the ministry of that, or the umbrella of that ministry, we have the church plans, and they do the same thing. They disciple, but now we have one of the ministries under Global Surge also in the education realm is Global Life University. And last year, we planted a campus here in Phnom Penh. And now that was begun about 23 years ago. I had the privilege of serving for the first 10 years of the life of Global Life University in Manila on their board of directors. And so I've been familiar with them for all these years, and now we're able to plant one of those here. And even, I talked about the need of missionaries to plant churches, but even missionaries who could come and teach. And as you know, here in Cambodia, a big thing is people who can teach English. Now, that's one thing that has made the Filipino missionaries such a good connection for Cambodia because they all speak English and speak it well. And so they've been able to take advantage of that skill set, if you will. And hopefully any American young people, you already know English now. But even if you know other languages in this area, it may be beneficial. But anyone could come and teach English. And that goes throughout. Here in the what you would call the Indochina Peninsula. Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and Myanmar. And then even down in Malaysia going into Indonesia, English can be taught. Now, Malaysia and Indonesia already know English fairly well, but all the others mentioned, anyone could come here and get a job as an English teacher or serve a ministry as an English teacher.
Right.
If you are supported by your local church group or whatever, come here and volunteer your services. And that would even be smiled upon more by the government because you're not taking money from here. You're coming in and giving your services to teach English. But as a Christian teaching English, you have a different perspective and you're able to share things. And here in Cambodia, we have the freedom to talk about the Bible.
Exactly. There's much more open than a lot of countries just by law, but then also I think in the culture and amongst most of the people, there is an openness of what is this about? And I'm willing to learn. Yeah, I've seen amazing. So let's say there's someone who's watching and they are a teacher. They've wanted to teach abroad for the ministry. How could they get involved with some of the ministries that you're doing? What would you suggest they look first?
There are different, probably any missions organization would have some connection. Yours, you were able to come here, but even connecting with Global Surge in Manila and Global Missionary Clearinghouse, we could use you, we could channel you through that connection if need be. And we have been able to establish a recognized presence here, registration and all of that. So you could come through as a teacher under that umbrella. And Travis, I'm sure you'll give them the information how to connect either with me or the Global Surge group, but you could do that. And we do have internships. A lot of them go to the Philippines first, but you can come straight here.
How long do those internships last?
You can do a month, quarter of the year, half a year. You could do, if you want to commit 2 years, you could do that.
That's
so the
perfect.
Timing is up to you.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people that would be interested in that. And even people who are on summer break that they could do in a month, 2, 3. And I remember I used to do that as a teacher. I'd use the summers to go teach in foreign countries.
And here in Cambodia, the school year kind of begins September, like our college year begins October, and we'll finish the end of July, first week of August. We've done now. We just had our graduation a few days ago. And so to do that, you could have 2 months. Now that it depends if you're not in a school calendar in the States, if you have the free time, you could come over and do that. Or during your summer break in the States, schools would still be going on here. So you could come and you could, but also we could even set it up. A lot of the English classes, we set them up any time of year. They're structured when we set them up and begin. And you could do, depending on what program you like to do, you could set up your own format and people would come. If you have a 2-month program, people would come and do that.
There's so much need for teaching English, and that is great. So there's a lot of ground to cover. I feel like there's so many things I'm actually excited to let the audience know about. First off, I feel like that Rawlings Foundation, the Highlands, that is used really well. Like I've seen, it is constantly active. You've got Bible college students there. You have camps coming in and out all the time.
Yes.
Sports camps, as well as and even the sports camps are used evangelically.
Yes, exactly.
And then just kind of the purely evangelical camps as well. And so you got pastors, you're connected with a wide network of pastors. I think they can bus in for free and they get to bring their students from these remote provinces to camp, get a great camp experience. Then they go home and they're more bonded with their pastors and with their youth group. And that was amazing to see. I got to volunteer for, I think, only a week. And it was amazing to see all that happening. So you've been a part of that ministry ever since you've been here in Cambodia, right?
Yes.
And if people wanted to volunteer a few weeks with that, would they reach out to you? Would they reach out to Highlands?
Yes, they could. I mean, it'd be easy to just reach out to me, but Highlands itself, or even through the Global Surge, and they have the connection with Highlands. So you have several options, but even reaching out to me directly would be fine. We could put a few others. You have some personal friends. We have mutual friends that are connected with Highlands as well, with the camp and with the college there. And any of those would be able to funnel them through. I will say this also. If you think, well, yes, I'm American, I know English, but I don't feel I'm a good English teacher. We also, in the Highlands Bible College, as well as Global Life University, we try to offer an education in music and computer and some business-related opportunities. We try to teach. Our goal is to train people for the ministry, but we know not everyone who goes to Bible college is going to become a full-time pastor or a vocational missionary. Some people will be lay members in their church, and maybe they get a job, but they become tithing, supporting members in their church to keep that ministry going. I mean, God does all of this. I mean, that's how he does our churches in the States. It's the same. So even those things that would help them get a better job opportunity, we try to teach those as well. So if you're good at IT, if you're great at music, and music, I would even say in the different church ministries, one thing I want to do is I would love to establish church bands for a lot of these churches that will never have them on their own. And some of the churches are out in areas and do not have finances to buy a guitar or a drum set or things like keyboard. So to do that, but if someone knew you knew keyboard, drum, bass, guitar, come over, teach, play, you could establish great bands. We could have a battle of the bands over here. I would love it.
Yeah, and and I bet some of those rural provinces too, I bet they have even some of those traditional instruments as well. So there's some really amazing things that I've heard on some of the worship in the provinces. It's like warms my heart to see that. I love that. And I just at the graduation, I saw someone I worked with a few years ago, and he came up to me and he was holding a book that was worship training. He was going to go train bands, and I just love that. And yeah, it's amazing. You had mentioned about church planting. So a lot of the people listening are prospective missionaries, and I think many of them want to become church planters. What advice, after working with church planting in the Philippines for 20 some odd years, and then now here, what, I don't know, advice would you give about what does church planting look like? What are some mistakes to avoid?
The main thing is a willing heart that is sold out in obedience to God. And if you do that, other little things will not matter. They'll fall into place. And if you exemplify that character to those you're training, again, the other things, like Matthew 6:33 says, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, then all these other things will be added. That even in church planting, it's the same way. You got to have that relationship with him. That's got to be the foundation, and a relationship with his word. That's got to be the foundation. And then everything builds upon that. But a willing servant teaching other people how to be a willing servant. And church planting really is just, it would be discipleship on steroids. It's that next level. You're discipling, but in the workings of the church.
We talked about how in some of the other podcast episodes, some people were talking about how discipleship looks different here in Cambodia than maybe what they grew up thinking it looked like in the West. Maybe in the West, they thought discipleship looked like meeting once a week at a coffee shop and reading the Bible together. But here, a lot of people were experiencing, sometimes people want to be with you all the time. They really want to learn from you, which seems a little more biblical. How do you see discipleship in the Philippines versus Cambodia?
It's the same in the U.S., in the Philippines, here. I mean, it starts with, let me just say this, it's not about the Bible lesson that you're going to teach 1 hour per week. It is the relationship. And you may teach that lesson for 1 hour, but yes, you talk to them, whether it's through phone, chatting online, meet them when you can, but it's that relationship. And you may talk a lesson once a week, but then every time you're together, you may refer to those lessons, or a new life lesson comes in while you're out together. Meet someone for coffee, walk around the mall together. I mean, it's life, because really this is what I teach the pastors here as well as the students. Discipleship is you sharing your life with the other person, with the disciple. You sharing what Jesus did in your life, what Jesus means to you, you sharing with them, so he becomes meaningful to them. Because, I mean, let's be honest, we know, we live in this world, we know we don't see Jesus, we see the effect. We know he's around, we know he's in our heart, but we don't have the privilege that the biblical disciples had to walk and talk with him and eat with him. Oh, that would be great if we could. But we can be the one that walks and talks with others and eats with them and shows them things. And we're showing them Jesus in our life. And that's really what, and the lesson, there are many different programs. Almost every church in America has their own discipleship program material. Well, I've used several different ones. But again, it comes down to whatever material you use, you sharing your life with them. And I would say it's the same in whatever country you're in, because no matter what country you're in and what culture you're surrounded by, relationship is meaningful in every culture around the world.
Absolutely.
It comes down to that. So you just have to use it. Here, you have the word in Khmer, tumnet tumnong. You have that relationship, sharing together.
Yes.
And I just think our missionaries in Thailand, they're doing the same thing. They may take the same material they taught in the Philippines, and we've done it here, translated it into Khmer, they've translated into Thai, but it's the person sharing their life relationship or their relationship with Christ into the life of that other person.
So I know that Thailand and Cambodia culturally are probably have more in common than the Philippines and Cambodia.
Yeah.
So does church planting look different here versus in Philippines as far as your experience has seen?
And again, I don't know if I really hit it when you asked the question a moment ago, but again, in church planting, it just follows the discipleship. And building small groups. Discipleship, yes, it should be kind of based one-on-one, you sharing with another individual, but you do that enough, then you get small groups of people that have the same relationship, and we do that, and then you get enough small groups. If you have 60 small groups of 10 people around, you've got a large group. And we do that. Our church planting initiative in Thailand is doing the same. And Easter of this year, we planted 2 congregations there. And they had been meeting as small groups, but we planted those. And so now we have 2 churches there that one meets on Saturday evening, the other one meets Sunday morning.
Would you say home churches?
Well, here's an interesting thing that God has done. God does many different, we have the relationship with the camp here in Cambodia. In Thailand, we were able to develop a relationship or piggyback on the relationship of our founder and his businessmen friends in Thailand, 2 Christian businessmen, one biggest rubber supplier, I think, in Asia, but he runs that in Thailand. And he has a friend who is also a Christian businessman, and he is a builder, and he started building sports centers with soccer fields. And the other guy supplies the rubber for all those soccer fields with the turf.
Yeah, with the AstroTurf, right?
Yeah. And they built 10 sports centers around Bangkok, 10, 11 million people in the greater Bangkok area.
Yep.
And so he's built those already. And there's another church planted in one, kind of runs traditional services. And then we have planted in 2 different locations, those 2 congregations. And we're hopefully starting another one within a year. But again, if we had more missionaries, we could start sooner. So that's in Bangkok alone. And this businessman, his goal is to build a sports center in every one of the 75 cities throughout Thailand.
Wow.
And put a church in every one of them.
That's amazing. And for people who don't realize, sports centers in these really crowded Asian-built styled cities where every block seems to be taken up, there's not much play space.
Right.
And so for young men, these sports centers are packed in the evenings.
Yes.
And this is like one of the best ways to reach young men.
Right.
And I've just seen, it's a great way. There's just a great camaraderie that happens with sports around there.
Exactly.
And everyone's there. It's fantastic.
And it's so strategic numerically also because in every one of those sports centers is planted within a community or a circle of communities that will be about 500,000 people on every one. And so you have an opportunity to impact large pockets of that population within the city.
Right. So what would you say? I know that coming from OMF, we do really, church planting is like the heart. And I think that I see things work at a much slower pace in OMF. And some of that reasoning, I've talked to the more experienced missionaries, and they're really trying to make sure it's indigenous and started like that. And so I wonder, how do you maintain and help maintain the health of all these different church plants? And how, I wonder what advice that OMF could learn from or I don't know. Embrace, because I see like a different strategy.
I don't know about other groups looking at us. Everyone's got their own style, but what we do, you have to take the time to focus. You can get tired, but when you get tired, you let opportunities slip by. But that's why, again, the more team members you have, the more you can do. And that's why Paul, the Apostle Paul, in Galatians gives us that warning / reminder, don't grow weary in doing well. Don't get tired while you're doing good. Because if you don't faint along the way, the reaping the benefits is right around the corner. And,
yes.
And we see that. We do that. We have people, any organization, we've had some come in, be part, and get burned out, go do something else.
Right.
So you're always going to have some attrition. And that's why I like what you said at the beginning, how long. So we give the opportunity up to you. And you can set your own time frame. Maybe you don't feel God is calling you to be a vocational missionary full time. For me personally, every decision I've ever made for God has been a full time. It's just I'm there until God moves me. Now, God has made me very mobile around the world, but everywhere I go, it's like I'm there until God moves me. But some people don't, well, I can give 2 years and then I have to do something. Okay, give the 2 years. Or if all you can do is a summer, give it and give your best. That John Piper in the States, he wrote a book called Don't Waste Your Life several years ago. And that book, it sounds like he would be challenging young people. Don't waste your life. But the target audience of that book is actually people at the age of retirement. When they finished working their career, when they finished raising their own family and they're going to retire, don't do that. Now shift your service to the Lord. And you've got that time. You've got the experience from working all these years. You've got the experience from raising a family. You can come over here and teach people what raising a godly family is all about.
Yes. And not only that, but oftentimes in Asian culture and many other cultures around the world, the elderly have an inherent respect.
Yes.
And so there are many people who will listen to an elder way before they'll listen to a young 20, 30-year-old. So you get to just by what God has given you. It talks in Proverbs, the gray hair is like a crown of wisdom. And there's that respect. And I love that too, because that reminds me of my grandparents. They're from Texas, and in their retirement, they've been doing short-term mission trips. They're involved in the church. They're like visiting people in hospitals and evangelizing in their neighborhood. And such an inspiration for me. So, and I sense the same thing with you and your wife. So tell me, you obviously felt that on your heart. Was it some of John Piper's sermons? Did God push that on your heart? What made you want to choose that lifestyle? Because that seems countercultural.
Well, for me, now I kind of done both. When I was young, my father was a pastor. I grew up in a pastor's home, and I thank God for that, because if I did not, no telling where I would be or what I'd be doing if I'm still alive. And he would have missionaries come through the church and share their experiences on the mission field, the different countries. Sometimes they would speak in different languages. They would show pictures of different people that they work with. And I just like that. And my parents taught me, when it comes to prayer, they taught me you can ask God for anything. You can tell God anything you want. He has promised to provide your need, but you can tell him what you want. And if it's in his will, he'll grant it. Even Psalm 37 tells us, as we're in our relationship with him, if we're living with him in that right way, he'll grant us the desires of our heart. And so I began to pray, and I just told God in my dad's church when I was a teenager, I said, if you can use me to do that, like those other missionaries, that's what I want to do.
I love that.
And the guy that was there that really hit me, inspired me, was a missionary from the Philippines. Old guy. Now he's gone on to heaven already, several years now. But I actually went, and I actually had the chance to serve with him, meet with him several times. So it was great. And I got to tell him how God used him in my life. But from that point, so I surrendered to go do that, be a missionary. And then my dad was pastoring in Texas, but he felt God calling him to take a church in California. So we moved my senior year of high school.
Oh.
Yeah. And we moved, but I followed him. I was a good son most of the time. And we followed him out there, and we were there. I went to a new school and left all my friends behind. But God gave me several new friends, but the first 3 friends I made in that high school were Filipinos. And I began to talk with them and go home with them. They would come to my house. But when I would go to their house, they would speak with their parents in a different language. They would eat different food, which was awesome. And so then I began to pray, Lord, if you want to send me to their country, I would love that. And that's where, then when I went to Bible college, I had surrendered to be a missionary in the Philippines. And that's what I did first. But then through time, raised my kids. They went off to college. And my wife, she had succumbed to disease. She had lung disease, and the Lord took her home. And so then I didn't know what to do to continue by myself. But I went back to the Philippines, and the Lord gave me a new wife. But I didn't know if God wanted me to stay there, her living and working in her own country. She was willing to do that. But then a missionary friend of mine asked me to pray about Cambodia. We had actually made a commitment to go to Thailand to be part of that church planting initiative. And then he said, would you come to Cambodia? There's these things besides what you're doing as director of the Missionary Clearinghouse, but also connect with Rawlings Foundation and the Highlands Camp. Would you pray about doing that? And that's what we did. And we've been here almost 5 years doing that. And so the Lord, you just follow every opportunity. So I have kind of hit both phases, like you said. I could have stayed in the States and said, well, God's changed my life. I could work in a church in the States. But I've never felt the call to do that or the burden to do that because there's so many there. And just being in Asia, I've always felt comfortable here. God has allowed that. Even so, after the age of 60, I actually studied and learned a new language.
Yeah.
So,
is it Tagalog or what?
Well, that was before.
Oh, okay. Now you're
coming here. I learned Khmer.
Yeah. Yes, I remember. Yes.
Yeah. I'm not as good as you, but I'm close. You're a young guy. You can do more. But as an old guy, I've done pretty good.
I agree. And I love your embracing of different cultures, which I think is kind of a difficult thing the older we get and depending on our backgrounds.
Yes.
So I wonder what encouragement you could give to someone who feels called to a different culture, country, but they're kind of intimidated by the culture. Like, where do you start? How do I be open to it? How do I learn another culture? Any advice?
Well, again, and I don't want to sound redundant, but again, it all boils down to relationship. You're coming from the States or wherever, a Western nation, and you're coming into an Asian culture or an African culture, South American culture, any other, but you're coming in and you know they're different, but you just humble yourself and you start a relationship. You be friendly, you be kind, because those are fruit of the Spirit anyway. We're supposed to be gentle and kind and long-suffering. Be patient with people you think are foreigners, because the flip side of that is you're the foreigner when you enter that new country. They're the locals. You're the foreigner coming into their life. So be patient with everything that's going on around you. But if you're kind and gentle to them, they'll be kind and gentle back. And that's what I've found. And you probably found the same in your studies of Khmer language. We can make mistakes, but they'll help us through it.
Totally.
It was the same in Philippines when I learned 2 different dialects there, parts of them anyway. And when I would try to speak Tagalog, and even the same thing has happened here. You're in the market, you're going to try, and you speak. You've memorized, you've studied, you've prepped your questions, and you say it, and they answer you in English. And it's like, well, I don't know if I said it right because you're not giving me the response I expected. I had it in my brain. But anyway, when you do say it wrong, they'll tell you. I have some guys where I live at the camp and work at the camp. A lot of the workers there, we do things together, and I'll say something. And now, as an American, knowing English as my first language, we have a certain word order. Well, here, a lot of that is flip-flop.
It's all different.
And so I'll say things in the American order with the Khmer words.
Right.
And then they will just gently say, the other order, and then I'll repeat it back so I learn it. But yeah.
That is so good. When you mentioned relationship requires humbling yourself, I think learning language is one of the best ways to do it, because I've been humbled so many times with my language, and even now, totally, because I think, it can sneak up on you. Oh yeah, I'm getting good. Yeah. I'm getting good. And then I say stuff and people don't even understand. I'm like, all right, humble yourself. And it's good.
Even as the old guy in Khmer class, I would blow all the younger students away with vocabulary. You give me a vocabulary test, I'm going to pass it. But then I get inhibited when it comes to speaking, because I know I'm going to mess up, and you don't want to mess up. But you have to, we said, humble yourself, put your pride aside, and just say it. And if it's wrong, they will correct you in a gentle way. I've never had anyone correct me in a harsh way.
I know. What a blessing that I've been shown so much grace with that. And I'm so thankful and humbled by that, and then also encouraged by that. If this is how I ought to be correcting others as well. It's such a great example.
And I'm sure you've had the experience too. Then others, Cambodian people, they'll try to speak to us in English, but then they'll make mistakes and they'll say, oh, sorry. And we can say gently back, even in their own language, oh, this, and we work it out together. And that many times the mistakes made by each other and the humbling by each other, that's where that relationship bonds strongly.
I totally agree. What about making it for the long haul? You've obviously been at this for a while, and you've overcome those stages of burnout, those opportunities to opt out. Any patterns that you see in those that burn out versus those that last? Maybe for you personally too.
Sometimes just we all know the term workaholic, right?
Very American, right?
You just have to try to avoid being that. I mean, you can love to work and you can work a lot, but you have to take times to rest. And by rest, it doesn't mean, okay, I'm doing all this, so I'll slow down. I'll do this ministry, which is not as hard. No, I mean, take a break from all ministry for a little bit, even if it's a day for a time. But then once in a while, take a 3-day break, go somewhere. What I like to do here is primarily here in Cambodia. This is where the bulk of our work is. But we do have these other ministry connections in other Asian countries. So sometimes we'll take a break and go spend 3 days or a week in Bangkok, Thailand, and check the missionaries there.
So taking a break is really important. And then how about spiritually? There's a lot of, spiritual opposition that you run into. How do you overcome that?
And sometimes when you take those breaks, you might take a break, even as I said, from ministry. That's the work of the ministry. But you don't take a break from God. You use those times where you are taking a break, and when you go somewhere for a day, 3 days a week, that can be your alone time with God to kind of reinvigorate the next phase of what you're going to do, coming back to your work and give it an extra punch. And so it's, again, it's relationship, even with my wife. And there's times we have to be apart for different reasons. She's got to do some things in the Philippines, or we do things in other parts of Cambodia, and we may be apart, but yet writing on Messenger, video call, phone call, whatever, that keeps that relationship connected. I could have a bad day and my wife's in another country, but then I get to talk to her, do a video chat, and it's like, oh, that changes everything. I'm back in. And so it's the same with God. You keep that closeness. Your relationship with Him, again, has to be the foundation of everything you do as a child of God. He is our Father. So we have to have that relationship with Him. So always, and again, I don't mean, okay, you take a 3-day break from ministry, you go for a little vacation, and you're going to do 8 hours of Bible study every day on that vacation. No, I don't mean that. But read your Bible, don't neglect that. But do talk to people in another country. Talk to people who aren't even in ministry, may not even have a relationship with God. And it just keeps you with those connections, and it keeps it fresh. And it's just a change up of activity, really, is what I'm saying. Here in Cambodia, we have some lovely places, some historic places like Angkor Wat. Go up there for a day or two. Get away from where, unless your work is in Siem Reap, then you have to go somewhere else.
Right. I was also curious, so since you've been doing stuff in Thailand and Cambodia, I feel as though me as an American, this was the first time I was really confronted with a lot of spiritual darkness, demonic possession. I mean, all this stuff that I really wasn't raised with.
Yeah.
So I was curious if you had any experiences, testimony with interacting with these things that are very different than we see in the States.
Yes. Yeah, even in the Philippines, I was preaching in a church in Manila one Sunday evening, and I actually gave an altar call and invited people to come down. And a man from the back, dirty, hair a mess, kind of staggering down the aisle, he came and laid on the steps in front of the pulpit, and we had some people go to deal with him, and he started wailing, just making noise, and they're trying to calm him down. So I ushered them off into a side room, and we continued and closed the service nicely. He was just wailing, and he was demon possessed. And so we were able to pray, and then it happened that probably I had gone away and then came back, and it was probably like 6 months later, I was in that church again, hearing someone else preach, but I went to visit. They were having a function, and a man walked up to me, very nice, clean man, hair combed, everything, shaved, kind of like you read about in the maniac of Gadara in the New Testament with Christ, right? And he said, "Hello, Pastor." He said, "Do you remember me?" I said, "I'm sorry, I have to tell you, I don't." And he described that night.
Wow.
And I said, "I do know who you are, but you did not look like this then." And he said, "I know." He says, "God has changed me." So we had that one. And there are people that call themselves witches up in the jungles.
Yep.
And here, you can get people, they'll say things, maybe even taunt you. I've never had any physical danger, but there have been dark moments. And God's always protected. I've had gangs of people around me where I think, oh man, is this the way I'm going? But God has always protected. And there are. And sometimes I'm surprised because I think these guys are terrible. And then they'll ask me what I'm doing here. And when I explain, well, I have a relationship with Jesus, they're, really, who's that? And a door is opened up.
Wow. Yep.
And so you just never know. And I would say this, you used the word darkness, and thinking of Thailand. Now, Cambodia and Thailand, both predominantly Buddhist. And but if you want to consider spiritual darkness, now we have missionaries in Pakistan as well. But in a lot of the statistics, Pakistan is listed as 0.01% Christian influence. And Bangkok is 0.007.
Really?
So it's really a greater level of spiritual darkness than Pakistan, if you think of that. And a lot of times we don't think that way.
Yep.
But they're both spiritually dark. And the thing about Cambodia, though, I think because they have gone through, in their history, they've gone through so much physical darkness. It wasn't spiritual darkness, but physical darkness. I mean, a genocide. From their own, they had wars with other countries, then a war within themselves, a civil war, and then some of their own, wiping out basically an entire generation. And they're still recovering, but that has pushed a greater awakening toward God, I think. They don't know who God is, but they believe someone's out there.
Right. There's definitely, that was what my pastor shared about how in the West they ask, is God real? Whereas here in Asia, it's more like, who is God?
Yeah.
Which one is God? Which God are you going to serve?
For the people in the States or even the other Western countries throughout the world that observe and follow this, even in the Philippines is a big holiday, but here, there is no Christmas celebration. I mean, they celebrate Christmas now because of commercialism.
Right.
The malls, but it's not Jesus, it's Santa.
Yeah, and your Christmas trees, but where's the nativity?
Yeah,
You know?
and they don't know it's Jesus's birthday.
Right.
And so, but it is an opportunity to tell. And so our churches, we teach them that. And so we do have little pockets of people at that time of year that are celebrating. And so when family and friends are invited for these special days, they're like, what's this about? And so again, your Easter, same way, because it revolves around Jesus, whom they do not know.
So I guess any final advice that you would give to prospective missionaries listening to this and wondering, should I go, or if I go, how? And what advice would you give them?
Well, the advice would be, well, first of all, the fact if you are desiring to be a missionary and you're in a position where you're even talking to God about the possibility. The first thing is, it sounds like a Disney movie, I think, but follow your heart. But the first thing, just follow that. Keep going. Don't let that be quenched. And if you don't have all the answers, talk with your pastor. Or if you have other Christian mentors in your life, let them know. Don't hesitate to let other people know what you're going through and let them pray with you and for you about that. But if you are looking to serve abroad in other countries for the Lord, evaluate your relationships now, because those will be the people that will support you when you're away. And you need that support base financially, but even more important, spiritually. You need a base of people back home that will be praying for you. So keep doing, and then cultivate new relationships. And also read as much as you can about the country you feel led to. And if you don't know where, then read about every country. And the Lord may use that to pique your interest in one more than the other. And if you still don't know, then give me a call and I'll tell you where to go.
There we go. There we go. I love that. Well, thanks so much. I really, really appreciate that. And one quick question on mentors. You mentioned talk to mentors or to consult people. Has that been something that's been important in your long-term ministry? Do you have mentors that you check in with? And
it could be we use the word mentor or coach. But I have people, older pastors, older friends, and they can come at different phases in your life. Right. I have an older brother who's a pastor in the States, and many years ago, I probably would not have listened to him, but we've both gotten older, and so I'll ask him questions now and then. What do you think of this? Now, when it comes to other cultures, he'll call me and ask me questions. But anyone it could be a grandmother or a grandfather, it could be your parents if they're Christian. But if you happen to be the first generation Christian of your family, there's got to be people within your church. The person, if you're still around, the person who introduced you to Christ, keep them in your life, ask them. But pastors, if you have friends who are missionaries, ask them things. It could be, I have some that I would call mentors, older than me, I've known for a long time. But then there's some that maybe I haven't known that long, but I know what they do, and I'll give them a call. And I'll say, hey, I know you do this. And it might start us into a deeper relationship. Mm-hmm. And then they'll be there for you even in later dates, later times. But it's really just, and also I'll say this, I'm talking about older, but really if you've come to know Christ, begin your relationship with Christ, you may have friends that are actually younger than you, but maybe they've been a Christian longer. So it could be the length of time that they've been a Christian, their relationship with Christ, and you can still learn from them even though they're younger than you. So don't close that door. And it's just really anybody, but they're out there. And if you don't have anyone, then pray, God, bring someone into my life. And he will do that.
Amen. Well, thanks so much. I really, really appreciate having you on. That was great.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
All right. I will catch you next time.
All right. Thank you.
If you're interested in any of the opportunities that Mark Johnson talked about in this episode, take a look at some of the links that I've posted in the description. If you're interested in finding opportunities abroad, check out opportunities.omf.org. There's even opportunities in your home country. Take a look. Finally, I really hope and pray that this episode has encouraged you to follow God's calling wherever and whatever that may be. Peace.